Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Quest for the Best Director podcast, also known as the greatest movie director bracket podcast ever. I think I put the ever in the wrong spot. Also known as, just three dudes living the dream in Maryland and Texas, respectively. I'm your host, Matthew Moore, and joining me is a guy who, if only angels have wings, then I must be in heaven because Caleb Ferguson makes my heart soar. Caleb, how you doing?
I'm very flattered. Thank you.
Yeah, it's what I just, you're welcome, Caleb. And, Caleb joining us is a guy who, no matter how many times we beg him, he won't get married. It's Derek Shorzinski. Derek, how are you?
Yep, it's not that I can't, it's that I won't.
Hey, we can find you a rich doctor, Derek.
You know, I bet, Dirk, you're finally are going to get married. It's going to be someone who's in front of you the whole time.
It'll be just
It'll also probably be a Japanese man in his late 20s, so.
So Corey?
Yeah, there you go.
There
Corey.
you go.
Yeah, this is the Quest for the Best Director Ever podcast. Each week, we will pit two directors against each other. This time, it's Yasujiro Ozu versus, oh my goodness, Howard Hawks. Sorry. Versus Howard Hawks, specifically Yasujiro Ozu's movie Early Summer versus Howard Hawks' Only Angels Have Wings. Whichever movie we decide better, that director will move on in our bracket. These are each of their fifth best movies, and as the weeks go on, we'll have a fourth, third, second, and first. If your favorite director gets eliminated, don't worry. They might be saved in our losers bracket. Okay. With all that said, you guys have any preference for a movie you want to start off with?
Let's start with Only Angels Have Wings.
Yeah.
Only Angels Have Wings. Okay. That's good, because honestly, I'm kind of tired of talking about movies where a young woman is being forced to marry an older man. Although that said, I am glad that, in this case, she was able to not have to marry him. But
Mm-hmm.
And also, they weren't really forcing her. It was more like they thought it was best for her.
she was
And
heavily
they were-
encouraged.
Yeah, she was. And that's the thing, they didn't even. Actually, we shouldn't probably get into that yet, but it wasn't even like that they're encouraging her so much as like trying to get everyone else to encourage her.
Yeah, true. But let's talk about Only Angels Have Wings. This is a movie starring the one and only Cary Grant and the beautiful Jean Arthur. Cary Grant plays this guy who owns a old plane company. I guess it's the best way to describe it, where they mostly deliver mail to other people, but sometimes do other tasks. And Jean Arthur's kind of this woman who she's traveling, kind of stumbles upon this port where the plane service takes place. She ends up falling in love with Cary Grant. Meanwhile, there's kind of this, what would you call him, like an anti-hero, I guess? Anti-hero
Definitely.
kind of character, Bat McPherson, who is infamous for having abandoned another one of the pilots who works at the airplane company. Whose name is Kid. Bat abandoned his brother while they were on a plane together, and Kid's brother died. Bat eventually kind of redeems himself as he has to fly this epic mission with Kid at the end, and when he had the chance to abandon Kid and was actually encouraged to abandon Kid, he did not do so. I think it's a good summary of the movie.
Yeah, I would say so. It's sort of like his redemptive arc. And then there's also the sort of love
Yeah,
thing going
yeah.
on between
Cary Grant's
What's
character
his-
and Jean Arthur's character.
exactly. Yeah.
Jeff, and
Bonnie.
whatever, Bonnie. There we go. Jeff and Bonnie. Why do people name their characters Bonnie? Jeez
Because
Louise.
Bonnie and Clyde, dude.
Yeah, it's not like
But I think
it's worse.
this it seems primarily like a love story. And I think the love story definitely takes up most of the screen time. But I think in terms of character transformation, it's primarily of this bad character, and then also Bonnie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although it might be debated whether Bonnie actually changes, but she changes, I guess. You're right.
In
Yeah.
the beginning, she does. Like they're kind of like it seemed like it was sort of like two halves. Almost like the first arc is kind of like Bonnie changing as she like becomes acquainted with this like new way
Yeah,
of life, and then the second half is like when this new character gets introduced and he sort of has this like redemptive arc.
yeah, I think that's fair. So I guess it's fitting that we kind of touch upon those two perspectives as with this romantic comedy movie, but also as kind of a redemptive, actiony, I guess pilot movie for lack of a better term, which really enough was kind of a genre back then, like people flying. But let's touch on the romantic comedy side first. Mostly romantic, not super duper funny. But what do you guys think of this romance story between Bonnie and Jeff?
I thought it was pretty good. It was like I think the one like downside to this movie is I think that like and maybe this is just like our time the way we're seeing it, but that it's like pretty cliche, and maybe it
Mm.
was like somewhat less cliche back then. But yeah, very cliche.
And then
And I don't know if that's necessarily like a super bad thing, but I do think it holds it back to some degree. Like it's pretty like typical. You have like this, you know, edgy, stoic male, and then this female who's kind of caught up in it all, and I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, for me, the issue wasn't the cliche, and it's just kind of how stoic Jeff was.
yeah,
Was what bothered me.
unnecessarily stoic.
Yeah, it's insanely stoic. Like people were dying, and you're just like, people died.
But I think that's okay though, because that's like that definitely wasn't just him. Like all of these pilots were being that same way, and so I think it sort of like gave it validity that like that's kind of just their life, and they gotta like deal with it the way they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
My
I
problem
didn't
is
mind
that
that
he was
part.
like stoic about like people dying. Someone is like he was stoic about like just like every relationship. It was
Yeah.
just like unnecessarily like even when like they're not like you know dying or whatever, and he has to like cope through it. He just like stoic for no reason.
Yeah, definitely like a kind of um, very like limited character. I feel in his characterization, like we don't really see him change that much, except for like the very end when Kid dies.
Yeah, and then they shoehorn like their explanation is like they shoehorn like well he has his heart broken or whatever by this one woman, which is like the most cliche thing like probably possible in that situation. And the way they introduced it is that I mean kind of non cliche. They have just Bonnie assume that's why he's so stoic, but I don't know. That's kind of like even though it's non cliche way, that's kind of a lazy way.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
and just really quick to clarify what Derek's referring to, so because I didn't mention this, the kind of anti-hero character Bat McPherson, he actually is married to Judy, played by Rita Hayworth, who does a phenomenal job, basically playing not only Bat's current wife, but also Jeff's ex-lover.
so can you guys maybe explain something to me? I was kind of confused because after the last flight where the guy dies and the other one gets burned,
Hmm.
it seems like they're going out of business. But then
Oh yeah,
but then they're like not going out of business because their contract like comes back because the weather clears. So I was kind of confused by like what exactly like transpired there because it
yeah,
plays into the emotional stuff a lot too.
yeah. Okay, I got that. I think because when like they they have the one less mission, that's what Kid and Bat are trying to do, and they like fail that because the weather's bad. But because it clears up, they can go out on the new run. So they immediately try to with what's his name? I think Tex,
Yeah,
the
Tex.
the one of the Three Stooges with the broken arm, uh, and Jeff, who also just got shot by Bonnie or whatever, accidentally, of course.
So
So
yeah, but the idea is that then like if they can do this mission, they stay in business, and if they don't, they go out of business.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
basically, if one of the Three Stooges and Jeff can't manage to do the mission, then it's over. But it's kind of like I felt like assumed like tonally that this was like a hopeful moment for them that they're going to
Yeah.
complete it.
So I think what's interesting about that is like at the very end, or like towards the end, when we see Jeff crying, uh, it's sort of like this twofold thing where like he's lost his best friend, yes, but they're also going out of business. So like it sort of gives like double reason for him to have this like transformation sort of, or at least this like change in attitude.
Yeah, but as you're saying, then it's kind of like contradicted by the fact that like they don't go out of business. But
Yeah, I guess they do like kind of go back on it.
I do think it works, for his change. I think he kind of finally realizes that like at some point he's gonna have to stop pushing everybody away, right?
Yeah. What I really like about it is that we sort of get this like exposition in the beginning that like all these people love flying like more than anything else in their lives, and like kind of kid has this like he's is like, I couldn't even explain it to you or whatever, like how much he loves it. And
Hmm.
then so we see like when people die, like they don't really care at all. Like they pretty much just like have to like they care, but they get over it by like singing, and they just kind of force themselves to get over it. But then at the end, when they're gonna go out of business, like and kid dies as well, they start playing sad music. And that was like super taboo when the guy dies in the first death. Like
Hmm.
they can't play sad music, they have to play happy music. But when this happens, when not when someone has even died, but when they're going to be restricted from flying, that's when they actually start mourning and start playing all the sad music because they won't get to do the thing that they love anymore. So I thought that was kind of like a subtle difference.
And also they are kind of taken away from having a good reason to die, right? They kind of speak on this, bitterly of the death while flying. That
Mm-hmm.
doctor has like a Shakespeare quote. Um, but you know, I think it's kind of like they had like we're gonna keep living until we die doing what we love, right? But now it's where does it go from here? Will their
Exactly.
life be redeemed?
It's a warrior's death, and it's like samurais. If you want to die in battle, or you expect to die in battle, and to be, that taken away from you is like a loss in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they commit like seppuku or whatever, right?
Well, uh, like dying in battle is like a warrior's duty.
Yeah, I'm saying that's why they commit like seppuku if they can't die in battle or whatever if there's something
Yeah.
shameful. But enough about samurais. I'm sure we'll get to a samurai
Yeah,
movie
we'll
at
have some
some
of those
point.
movies later, yeah.
um, but to me, there's two big things that stand out from this movie, like on a very positive perspective. One, I think, even more so than a lot of movies you've watched, although similarly to Early Summer, this movie is shot excellently. We have a lot of really cool subtle things with his framing,
hmm
and secondly, I think the acting is pretty stupendous, right?
hmm I really like the aerial shots.
Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
really cool aerial shots.
Yeah. Honestly, the I felt like on the acting perspective, I felt Bonnie was kind of like, I don't know. Maybe it was just the character, but I don't think it was written very well. So I don't think you could act as well as she
No,
could.
she's definitely the worst of like the main characters.
Yeah.
Wait, okay, I completely disagree actually.
Whoa, okay, hot take.
Yep, here it is, first one of this episode. All right, so at the very like towards the end, um, she sort of has this like I can't remember the exact context, but it's definitely towards the end of the movie. I think it's when Jeff is crying, and then she's kind of like talking to him, and she like gets really impassioned, and it sort of combines like this really cool cinematography change with a really big change in like acting as well, because like she acts this like I wouldn't say like emotional breakdown, but maybe like emotional upwelling. Like her emotions are kind of like getting the best of her, and she kind of starts like almost like swaying back and forth, and she like really gets into it and acts it extremely well. And at the same time, the camera like for one of like the first times in the movie that I can really think of, they like really zoom into her face and give her a personal close up. And I don't know, like both of those like stark changes to what had come before, like really like highlighted the emotionality of that scene. And so maybe I kind of agree that like none of the acting outside of that was particularly stupendous, but for at least that one scene, I think she really shone.
Sure, I could see that. I like that
Interesting
scene
that you
too.
did the close-up thing because 2 times before that scene, every moment when it was like a romantic scene with her and Jeff or whatever, and she's like trying to, express that to Jeff, they'll do a close-up with like very bright lighting and like almost halo effect that you see in like those old movies, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt that. So they did that twice, and I kind of, I don't know, it was kind of an almost unnecessary the lighting, but I noticed that they did a close up every time. It was like a romance. It's supposed to be like a
Also,
romantic moment between them.
in those scenes, like when there's a romantic scene between the two, it's just so dominated by Cary Grant's character, right? Just in terms
Yeah,
of like how long they take showing each character and stuff. I mean, and you can't really blame them, right? Because if you have this, Cary Grant, and then not Cary Grant, obviously you're gonna want to be showcasing Cary Grant. But it just is unfortunate for Jean Arthur, especially because it's like the second main female character is Rita Hayworth, who is like a
yeah,
name I actually have heard of,
yeah,
Unlike,
and she was
yeah,
pretty
Jean
good
Arthur.
too. She was a really good actor.
I thought she was a really good actress as well. And honestly, I think we said Jean Arthur's not the weak point, but across the board, the acting is really good. The supporting cast is really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thomas Mitchell as Kid is phenomenal.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was honestly my favorite performance was by him in this movie.
Yeah, he's a
He
really
has
good
such
actor.
range.
He is amazing, and it's even crazier because I think he did Stagecoach later that year, where he's also really good, but plays like a very different character. So just so like cool that this guy is just he's on a streak right now in terms of acting.
Yeah, and honestly, the scene where he's dying,
Mhm.
that was like I don't know, where he's like, I'm not scared, but this is my first time and I don't want no one to see it. I was like, oh man, that actually that was like
Yeah,
one of the few moments that was like actually like really emotionally hit in this film.
but I also think it's not even just like we said, it's the range, right? So he can do these really powerful moments, but also just the subtlety when he's just kind of shooting the shit with Jeff, right? Or one of my favorite moments when they're just messing with Dutchie,
Oh
and
yeah,
Jeff's like, Dutchie, I think you might have to fly, and,
yeah,
and I think Kid plays Thomas Mitchell as Kid plays it perfectly. Where he's like, yeah, Dutchie, I think Jeff thinks it's a really good idea. Dutchie should fly. So great. Dutchie's amazing too. I don't actually not
yeah.
certain who
Dutchie,
plays him,
oh
but
my
he's
god,
so good.
I love Dutchie. He's such a character.
I think the cool thing about this movie, when we're kind of like talking about these like funny scenes, is how they know how to like have humor in this movie and make it feel like a funny movie, but they don't put like too much humor in terms of quantity. It's just a few funny things they do have are like really funny. So they feel like the movie as a whole gets funnier, but it doesn't have to like diminish or take screen time away from the serious stuff because like when it's done so well.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a really good point. I do wish there's some points where I feel like they could have thrown in a joke here or there, but it plays
That's
well.
probably true. I love when the basically like because we talked before about like how these like kind of scenes between Jeff and Bonnie are kind of like recurring. Like they kind of have like three or four of those, and I love how like right as like the tensions ratcheting up, they have that like radio calling in. I can't remember what exactly it is, but it's like
Hmm.
look out, coming through or whatever. Every time like they start to get close, so like things
Oh
start heating
yeah.
up, and every time look out, coming through.
Or like when they're in the room together and people just keep like bursting through the door.
Yeah.
and I actually really like Jean Arthur's. I mean, the writing was really funny at least. Maybe not necessarily how she did it, but when she's like, "What is this? I like Grand Central Station. I could have put a hot dog stand here."
Oh yeah, I feel like she kind of like missed the beat on the last part, where it's like her and Kid just like up out of the cell right there, and it's like I don't know, she kind of like
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
she
know how
was.
she played that a little off, but I don't know.
But I think the
Good and
first line
funny.
you're right is delivered well. The second part I agree is a bit weak.
So it was kind of like a little weak, but it's really just nitpicking. The writing on that point was really good.
It is so funny, her character. It's funny, and this isn't the con of the movie. I'm not saying that, but I just think it's funny how like so we get her at the beginning, right? And she also introduces like one of the main two characters, right? Like 10 minutes in the movie, that was gonna be her and then the guy that ends up dying, right?
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
thought like these were our main two characters. Turns out they weren't. But she's
it
very
felt like it.
central. What's that?
It felt like it for sure.
Yeah, but so she feels like a very central character at first, and then she kind of just like disappears for like 25 minutes.
Yeah,
They have like,
that was so weird.
come on, honey, we have some like exposition to get through, and I'll touch on this more with Ozu, but it was so funny because I watched the Ozu film first, right?
Hmm.
And Ozu never gives any exposition ever, right? Like you have to figure out like everyone's relationship by yourself, right? Like I'm like furiously taking notes just to like make a family tree here. And then like Hawks, in his movie, it's or only just on Link specifically. I don't want to speak for Hawks as a whole, but it just like, and then he betrayed his best friend,
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
was unforgivable. And it wasn't even a big complaint. It was just really funny because like it's such a stark contrast.
yeah. It was. I don't know. This that was like one of the things. I don't know. It's kind of nitpicky, but it felt like maybe it was just like because it's an old like American film, but it felt like kind of hackneyed like those old movies sometimes too. So kind of like felt tied down in the times a bit.
Sure, but I thought it was fun.
I also think that's like not necessarily a bad thing, or at least it's done well, all this exposition, because like um Bonnie and this other like the guy's wife are like newcomers here, so it makes sense
Yeah,
to like be introducing these things and explaining it to her. So whereas like in the other movie, like no one here's a newcomer, so it wouldn't really make much sense to have be like explaining these family relationships. Whereas I think like here it's definitely done well. Like you can't like it's a stylistic difference for sure, but I don't think you can say that one's even better than the other. Like if you're if you're gonna like give exposition, like this is how you do it. It's just done well and it makes sense. And I
yeah, I
think
think so
like
too. I think
it
it's the
doesn't
speed of
hinder the
it,
movie at
right? It
all.
seems natural when they do it. It's not a
Exactly.
bad thing. I just think it's a really big difference, though.
Oh yeah, I agree completely. Yeah. But I think
Um,
like, that's kind of one of the cool things that this movie does is like how you mentioned that she disappears for 20 minutes and
mhm.
like you originally think she's going to be like the main focus of the movie and she's a major character but she's not always the focus of the movie. I think it's really cool like that they give you this feeling of like this community and this group of people and how all the characters feel like they have a pretty solid personality behind them that's distinct from the others and like how it doesn't overcommit to one character but kind of just shows you this community as a whole. It was done pretty well in that way.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like if I took, like 3 or 4 episodes out of like a pretty good sitcom.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
even more impressive because it's like if you took 3 or 4 episodes out of like a sitcom like season three, even though we're just now getting to know these characters, it feels like we've known them for a while already.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing you kind of touched on earlier, Caleb, was like the off-screen like sounds of like the radio when you're trying to be intimate. Not I shouldn't
Uh-huh.
say intimate. I'm trying to be romantic. I think the sounds in general in this movie are actually really good. I know so it's acting and framing, but the sounds are also phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure.
Like
That was like my favorite thing about the plane scene,
yeah,
especially the first one when Joe is being like, there's like the fog and no one and he can't see,
yes,
and they just focus on the
exactly.
crowd, like trying to guide him in, and you just hear the sound of the plane like as they get closer and far away, like the angle that he's coming at. It sounds wrong.
And just like this whirring sound, right? Like
Yeah,
it just like adds so much tension. Oh my gosh, it seems so good. And then of course, once he dies, like Hawks does this cool thing, which like whenever he wants to like add a bit of like awkward tension, he just puts like a bit of room on the side, right? Like he doesn't fill the frame completely, and it works really well. Like in that scene, so he dies, and then just cuts to this wide shot, which we haven't really seen like a total wide shot the whole time, right? And but it's even wider because there's a bit of space on the sides, and you're just like, oh, that doesn't seem right. Like there's gaps, and feels more empty. But it works so well. Poor Joe.
Yeah.
I'll say it right now. That's messed up of Jeff.
Wait,
You
to
don't
do
lead a
what?
guy. You can lead the guy to his death, okay? That's whatever. But then you have to take his girl afterwards.
Yeah.
Although,
Like,
to be fair, like it really wasn't his fault.
yeah,
Like,
I
he was
know.
like, you need to wait for the fog to clear, and this guy was like getting too into this blonde, so he's like, "Oh, I'm coming down right now," and then dies. So pretty much all on him, actually. I did not have very much sympathy.
I don't know.
Get
It's not
the
all.
kid
Jeff
sad.
could have let the other guy go up. The other guy was like, "Yeah, I'm down to go up."
That's true. That's true.
It's like, no, it's your turn.
It's not. Yeah, it's like, dude, if everyone's cool with it, just like, why does it matter? And then also right afterwards, it's like, don't worry, I can take over where you left off, buddy.
Oh god. Yeah, that part was pretty messed up.
Like, geez, Louise, Jeff. I know we're trying to run a bit shorter of a pod today, so do you guys have any last things you want to say about this movie?
I will say that there was one moment of like completely unintentional humor in this movie
Mm-hmm.
because I think it was a kind of a difference in vernacular between this time and that time. But when Kid is like on his deathbed and he's like dying and he's like, Jeff, I'd hate to pop a boner in front of you, but and then
Oh, yeah.
I know that it completely did not mean the same thing and it wasn't meant to be funny, but it still cracked me up. So
No,
I'm
is
giving the movie points for that.
I don't know if you give it points, you take away, but there's definitely going to be a change in points somewhere there.
Honestly, like the funniest moment, or at least one of the funniest moments, was when the doctor comes in, and because they're gonna go to the oil field or whatever, and there's the injured guy, and he comes in and then he's like, I don't know, Doc, it's gonna be a little dangerous, and he starts like talking in like Spanish like super fast, and they just like completely ignore him while while he's talking. He's like giving this great, speech with such emphasis, and they're like, yeah, 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 and then he finishes.
Yeah.
He's like, and then they're like, what was he saying?
He's down. He's down to go. Also, really quick on the doctor and this movie, also would definitely not fly in 2018. Comes off pretty offensive at some points.
Also,
Okay, first big whoa is when Bonnie is like towards the beginning. The guys are like, "Hey, we're American." She's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm glad to hear something that doesn't sound like pig Latin." She's like, "Whoa, big yikes to that one." And then also there's a scene where like, Jeff's trying to have a breakthrough with Judy, and he's like waterboarding her.
Yeah.
well, she was drunk though. I think that was like he was trying to sober her up.
I don't know. Maybe even if he was, that is not the tactic. It's not like torturing somebody.
Well, because that's what he did. Well, he did it to himself to like wake up for the flight, and he was
Except for, like,
really drunk and was
splashed
like trying to get more.
He's like pouring water on her head and like dunking her in, and, like grabbing her by her hair.
I mean, yeah, he was obviously more violent, but like when he was doing it to himself, he did the same thing. He put his head in the sink and poured it over his neck, just as he did to her. So I think it was to sober her up. I think the optics were not good on that one. But,
No, they were not. Especially because she's like,
But it was-
"Thank you so much. You helped me out. Really appreciate it." What are you gonna say?
But I don't think he was like being like bad or abusive. I think he was just trying to sober her up.
No, but I just think it's the optics just weren't. Especially with the pig Latin. The pig Latin comment probably worse. That was
Oh yeah.
Bonnie. You gotta watch it there. Maybe her and Jeff deserve each other.
Yeah, right.
She would have eaten poor Joe up. Anyways, but let's move on to early summer. Which, my first question, actually on both of these movies, but mostly about early summer. Why is it called early summer?
Oh, that's because that's the time when the harvest, beginning of like the harvest season or whatever. So it's like she's reaching her harvest season or like the start of it pretty much. So like this is her marriage is like beginning of her harvest.
I see. So you're saying our character Noriko, who lives with her family, including her parents, her brother, and then her brother's wife and his two children in Tokyo, Japan. who is single, loving the single life. Right after World War II, you're saying that she has a harvest when she eventually gets married to what's the guy's name? The doctor
Yabe.
Yabe. He has two names though, right? I'm not
Yeah,
going crazy.
it's yeah. He has his first name's like Kinikichi,
Kenichichi,
but
yeah. When
every
she eventually gets married to Yabe, see how I kind of
yeah.
like. Okay, let's see what I did there, Caleb. I kind of like I threw in the exposition while like
Yeah,
replying to Derek's statement about the title.
you're getting really good at podcasting, dude.
I know they should pay me for this. So YouTube won't monetize us, you know what I'm saying? But it's fine.
We gotta put it. Well, now that we're not monetized, we gotta use only the finest copyrighted music.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll start throwing clips of the movie in there too. Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, it was
But
an
yeah,
amazing. Earthworm was really good, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that was good.
amazing.
I mean, Ozu is someone who's like, it's really hard not to like his movies because he's never gonna like offend you in his movies. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like they're just so relaxing. I guess I text in the chat like this movie's just a vibe. Um,
I do have a question though, because we said before that the summer was like her harvest and whatnot, but why
sure.
would it not be called late summer? Because isn't the whole point that she's like late to get married?
Oh well, that's because it's supposed to be like her personal harvest time. That's why it's called because like the is also because the it's not like the title's not harvest time. It's barley harvest time, which is like in early summer. So it's like a distinct difference because like regular harvest time is like a little bit later. So it's kind of like
Hmm.
her personal. She's like personally offset.
Oh, so you're saying this movie is about the early portion of her summer?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense now.
That does make sense. Now I completely understand. And I think this movie it touches on a lot, right? Although it's a movie that's relatively peaceful, I would say that there's a lot of conflict in this movie, or at least it touches on a lot of kind of greater conflicts, right? A generational conflict, a conflict between genders, and of course, this conflict between kind of married and unmarried. Which of those conflicts do you want to touch on first, Derek? I'll leave it to you.
Probably generational because
That's the biggest,
I think
yeah.
yeah I think it's well I don't know if it's the biggest because that's like the thing is like all the like conflicts are kind of like subdued like they're not supposed to be like something that hits you over the head. It's like you're supposed to like appreciate and like look at them and kind of think about them on your own.
Yeah, yeah. There's never that big conflicting. I say conflict, right? But there's never that big moment. It's just you kind of get a feel for how both generations are viewing um, Noriko's decisions.
Which I
Exactly.
think in this movie, it's interesting because it's almost like the conflict. Like conflict is typically like part of your narrative in a movie, but in this case, I think the conflict is part of your exposition. Like these conflicts aren't necessarily getting resolved necessarily, or anything's
Oh,
like really
sure.
happening in them. Like it's more just like a slice of life. You're just like getting a little bit of this family's life, and there's not necessarily too much of like a big narrative drive. It's just kind of all slice of lifestyle.
Yeah, but that was like the thing is that like there's no like big confrontation, but how Ozu like goes about like showing us the confrontation is like very like through like shot comp is what I noticed is because like when like it's in like generational like conflicts between like the mom, dad, and her brother versus Noriko like when there's any confrontation like in those situations like it switches from very wide central shots to more close up and fast shots. So and it
And
does like
also,
that
he'll pit the sides against each other, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So he'll always frame, older people one shot, then younger people in the other shot. Older people, or when it's between two people, just one person, one person, one person, one person.
Yeah. So it was very distinct because like at, from the very beginning we get like very calm, peaceful music in the home, and like it feels very homey, like a home should.
Homie. The
And
music.
the shots are always very central and taking the environment as well as the people from like and keep the people very central. So it's like there's no really confrontation between the environment and the people, or the people and other people. And then whenever it's like Noriko, it's like having like some kind of confrontation, though confrontation like very like minor in this movie. It's like finally switches from those shots.
I think one cool thing they did to like always nestle the characters in their environment, as you said, and like kind of involve the house or their home or whatever, is by like a lot of shots would take place with like the camera would be located in one room and it would be filming someone in another room. So you would like kind of see down the hallway and like all of the rooms on either side, and then at the very end would be your subject.
Yeah, it's really cool because you get like a sense of the like logic of the environment. Like you know how to get from like the parents' bedroom to like the dining room, and like,
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and it's even cooler because then when you get to a space that's unfamiliar,
like, without like going around and giving you a tour explicitly, it gives you like a sense of the actual like home, and makes you feel like part of the family.
Yeah, it's cool because when you get to a space that's like unfamiliar, it's even more powerful, right? Where like when the kids run away and they're like crossing like that bridgish fieldish area. Sorry, there's like a siren in the back. It's probably super duper loud. I apologize for that. It's kind of scary because it's like we haven't been here before. Where are they?
And there's this one scene where they transition from the interior to like a beach. I think it's when the two women are on the beach together, and it just kind of like starts off like kind of panning up. I think like up this dune. So you just kind of have this. It's like literally a blank whitish thing on the bottom, and then a line, and then like the blue sky above, and it's just like so completely different than all of the other shots. It really like kind of takes you out of it a little bit in a way, but like in a good way. Like it feels like you're being pulled out of that initial space very like strongly.
Yeah, especially because he doesn't really ever pan, right?
Yeah.
So when he does pan, it's really powerful. I mean, I think that Ozu really wants you to forget that you're watching a movie. Like it's as uncinematic as possible.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Like the best way possible.
Which I'm Derek, I'm sorry.
In like the best way.
Yeah, in the best way possible. Yeah, like because he can still accomplish all these things that we're talking about without. Because usually when someone's supposed to establish space, what do? They usually do a large overhead panning shot, right? Ozu has, I think, like I can only think of like one overhead shot. It's not even overhead. It's like the train shot. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I love that shot. So
it's really
much.
Pretty. Yeah,
but it's so beautiful.
But the thing is, probably the only overhead shot in the whole movie I can think of. Like he doesn't do it much, but still, I never feel uncomfortable. I never feel like I don't like the space hasn't been properly defined for us.
I kind of wonder like what percentage of screen time is taken up inside that house, because I really feel like it probably has to be at least like 60 or a bit higher percent. And like
it's a lot of time, yeah.
The house is like almost this like a character in and of itself, because you just spend so much time getting to know it, and like Derek said, like you become familiar with like with its logic, and at the end of the movie when they kind of all move away from living in that house, like you almost feel like that character has died or something. Like there's a loss of that character, and I think it makes you feel it really powerfully, like more so than you would feel attached to most spaces in movies.
For sure, and that character has kind of come to symbolize the family, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
This is the loss of the family when we're kind of losing this space that is the house, and Kip said because it's so emphasized, it's really felt.
Another technique I think he uses to do that is every time at the beginning it has very specific music playing when they're in house, and then it ends as soon as it like they change the scene setting to, I think after that it's the office where Noriko works, and I think that was very deliberate because he does that again every time it switches from or to the house. There's like that very specific music with kind of like flutes or maybe piccolos and like some light strings. It was very, I think it was very intense.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I didn't even pick up on that, but like thinking back, that definitely makes sense because the music's noticeable for sure. In fact,
Mm.
funnily enough, the
Um,
music might be the part that takes you out of the movie the most. But in a good way though. It's still really amazing music. Um, do you want to talk about like the acting in this movie? Because I think it's also super stellar.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I thought the acting in like Noriko especially was like
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Oh my
really good.
god. She
She's
was
such a great
amazing.
actress. Derek, you something?
Because it was like, I think a lot of it was in her eyebrows. Because I noticed when she was talking to her brother at the bar with her friend Aya, like she put a lot of her emotion in her eyebrows when she was like finally like confronting him about like how she felt. Like he says like the really cool line, um, like women have become. He says like women have become so forward, taking advantage of etiquette, and then like immediately her eyebrows like change, like shape and like position is like. It's like that's not true. We've taken our natural place. It's been men that've been for too long.
Which, by the way, Ozu's like 50 years early on that one. Like, shouts to him. Like, there are some guys who still haven't figured that one out, you know?
Yeah, especially for a Japanese man at this time.
Yeah.
It's a fairly hierarchical, society.
Yep, very matriarchal.
while we're
Or
talking about
patriarchal,
like
not matriarchal.
while we're talking about these like conflicts that are kind of like not necessarily like directly discussed, but just as part of the setting, I think that like this being a post-war Japanese film, East and West comes into play a lot. Like there's kind of like that more like traditional, somewhat more patriarchal Japanese way, and then there's kind of like the new, little bit more progressive Western way, and we see that in like the way they're dressed a lot too. Like
Yeah.
I think they even like directly ask it. They asked one like, was he dressed in a Western dress, or and she's like, no, it was in a kimono or something like that. And I can't remember
Yeah.
what that was in context too,
Yeah.
but and
This is a common thing Ozu does. Yeah, the older people wear kimonos, to clarify. Older people wear kimonos, and the younger people will wear, like, dresses or suits.
yeah, and then
Yeah,
there's also like the very
that's
like
a
deliberate.
societal thing as well.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but that's a societal thing because even today, like older people above 65 are wear like red kimonos and stuff like that for like as tradition.
But the guy when he comes home from work every day, they show him multiple times like changing from his like business clothes into his kimono, and it's like a very like deliberate change from this fancy new way to the old way.
Oh yeah,
And he's kind of stuck between, right? Like, he models
Mm-hmm.
himself almost after this older generation, but he isn't in the older generation. You said with how he treats his kids, where he
Yeah.
actually very negligent and like not nearly as validating as we would expect. I think that from the time.
oh yeah, for sure.
But those kids are really good actors too.
Oh my god, yeah, for especially for child actors.
Yeah, they're really really talented. Like the older boy is obviously like amazing, right? Where you really
Yeah.
get like a sense of emotion where oh, he really wanted those train tracks.
I love those kids. Those two kids like worked so well. It's like I don't want to say like comedic relief because they weren't necessarily like relieving anything, but just as like a great moment of levity. Like that
Hmm.
fucking little shithead kid, like
Oh yeah,
just like being a oh god, that guy was an ass, but he was hilarious because of it. Like no, he like didn't wash his face. He just like got the towel wet. And then the other one like was kicking bread across the floor. They just never listen. They're always causing problems, putting their hats on during the picture. Like every time they show up, they're like little jesters.
But
yeah,
there, but it also further emphasizes like the generational conflict, right?
Yeah, for
Where
sure.
like
But
not only see the difference between kind of this generation of young people in their 20s. I want to say like this millennial generation, but definitely weren't millennials at that point. The generation of people in their 20s versus like this older generation. You also get people in their 20s as opposed to like these little kids who are just super disrespectful. I mean, he's literally. It was actually an amazing scene where they have like this senile uncle, and the older boy is getting younger boy to shout "idiot" at him. Idiot! that's it. And the uncle's pretending not to listen, and then the kid walks away, and the uncle just starts laughing. Like, uncle's pretending like he can't hear him because he's deaf, and then the kid walks away, and the uncle just starts laughing.
Yeah, it's like how it becomes like not a big deal is because like these people don't really care. They don't really take them so serious that them acting out like this is a problem for them. It's just humor.
But didn't you say that because I think these kids are really the only connection that this old generation has to the young world. And I guess just this is kind of touched on a lot, right? Where these older people they don't really have anything else they're doing actively, right? All they can really do is just exist. You know, the mom will say often like, "Man, we're gonna be so happy," or like, "We live such a happy life." He's like, and the father's always like, "Let's not ask for too much." And I think Ozu also claims it's a shot comp. Like in that idiot scene, it's really funny, but also it's really cleverly shot where you have the uncle enters the background, right?
Yeah.
Which I think the symbolism there is pretty clear, right? Like he wants to just be seen as like a bat, and he's existing in the background. Now he's not at the forefront of life, and this kid comes in, who is very much at the forefront of life, right? He's going to do something with his life. His destiny has not been decided, and the camera flips to where him and the uncle are both in the foreground. The kid walks away, uncle's in the background again. It's stuff like that. Like, yeah, he owes so much to emphasize just how little. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, not impact, but how little of a say, I guess, is a better word for it. How little of a say the old people really have in life.
Hmm.
But there's also this whole married versus unmarried concept we haven't really touched on, which goes hand in hand with the older, younger, traditional kind of more liberal, more progressive, I should say, not liberal, more progressive um, viewpoints of life. What do you think of this whole married unmarried conflict?
It was hilarious.
And fascinating, right?
Yeah,
Oh.
because Aya and Noriko uh, are distinctly like treating this as like a way to like make fun of their married friends, like calling one of their married friends Mrs. Carrot because she got angry at her husband and only fed him carrots.
And then
Like,
they have like this ultimate thing, right? Or like at least I think that's like this checkmate where they can be rude to them, and then they'll be like, "Why are you getting mad at us? You're married. You have no reason to be upset."
Dude, honestly, like the banter between all those women was like that was just hilarious. They were so funny to each other, both with like that back and forth between the married and unmarried, and then the how the two unmarried women they would do this to other people, but specifically to the married women, where they would like be like really like tongue in cheek or like sarcastic, and then they would always go like yeah at the end of like every sentence.
yeah,
That was like
yeah.
so funny every time that yeah. Oh, it's so funny. Like I
Speaking of
was
things
getting
that sound
irritated
funny,
just watching it.
speaking of things that sound funny, what's up with like the father's voice, the grandfather's voice?
What about it?
It sounds like a Japanese Yoda.
Oh,
He sounds so
Yeah,
funny.
just a little bit.
Yeah, he talks
I think
like
it's because he's so old and his voice is so deep. That's just how he sounds like.
it sounds so
Probably
funny
doing
though.
cigarettes. Yeah.
Cracked me up the whole time. Every time he talked, couldn't like get it out
I
of my
think I'm
head.
gonna start doing that in life whenever I'm like messing with someone. Just yeah.
Yeah.
You can't beat it. It's unbeatable comedy. Whoever you're doing it to has no recourse. They just lose.
Uh, that that was so good.
You guys think Noriko was too old to be getting married?
I don't
No,
know.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
so
she's
either.
28.
I get why everyone was freaking out. Calm
I
down.
mean, I think it was a different time and
Yeah.
culture than ours.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah,
her
like-
homie Aya, she's fine.
That's true.
Because
Well, I think the main thing. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I think Aya is trying to like get with the office worker that Noriko like worked for. That's what it seemed like at least because
He's
He's
married though,
always
isn't
hanging
he?
around him. Oh, that's right. I don't know. It's felt like that
Debunked.
was yeah debunked. Fan theory debunked.
I think the main reason why they care so much, though, is because she got a really good offer. So, like, it was basically once she got that big offer, they're like, "Oh, you should really take this. It's the right decision."
Mhm.
And that's why they were so sad when, or like, kind of bummed out when she married the other guy. Not because, like, because if she had done that before the offer, I'm sure they would have been overjoyed. But it was more about like this very lucrative offer that they were interested in.
But
And
he's
as for
still
the
a doctor, right? Like,
yeah,
she's still marrying into money here. They can calm down.
but like while we're like talking about that like office guy that they both worked under, he was also such a funny character.
Oh
Like
my god,
such a,
yeah.
like a creepy old man in a way, but also like very endearing and
Hmm.
like not offensive in that like kind of creepy old man. Like what
Like
was it?
what, Caleb?
He makes some innuendo, I think, when he's like sitting next to I think Noriko on the couch, and he makes some sort of innuendo, and then she like kind of frizzes up and is like, "Come on, don't be coy," and then he just kind of like cackles and walks away. But oh man, what was it? Like it was something sexual. He was like, we'll have to, explain to you what it's all about or something like that. I don't quite remember, but something along those lines.
He's really great. This cast runs so deep. You know what I mean? Like, it was also such a pleasure watching all of the characters.
Yep.
Like, we didn't touch on the grandpa with the Yoda voice too much, but he's really fun to watch. The mom is obviously her story is really touching, right? And also tragic when she's always like, "We're gonna be happy, aren't we?" It's like, "Aw." And then there's this ending sequence is so strong. We haven't talked about that either. But the two parents in the ending sequence is really good. Dirk, do you have any thoughts on the end? The end?
Uh, I was gonna say before we get into that though is that I noticed that it might have been like unintentional or like just how things turned out, but I thought it was interesting. The person who like started like the marriage conflict was this really old uncle who was deaf to like what Noriko had to say.
Yeah. But he's not completely deaf.
But he plays deaf most of the time.
Wait, I think he's just senile. I think he just has bad memory. He's a
See,
deaf.
no,
He's kind of just like old man character. It's a little bit of everything. It's like being senile and being deaf when the narrative slash humor requires it, but then also being like all knowing at the same time.
Yeah. um.
yeah, I felt it might have been unintentional, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless.
Sure. One more thing I'll talk about before we go to the voting, which we'll do soon. But short episode today. Sorry, all the fans out there who I'm sure we keep getting all these YouTube comments begging us for we want longer podcasts. Just gotta tell them no. But I want to go back to Caleb's West versus East thing because Noriko in particular is like defined as a very Western character, at least by Aya. But then she
Mhm.
kind of goes along. I guess not super traditional because she ends up marrying a guy with a kid, which is kind of like different, but still a pretty traditional route that she settles down at a relatively young age. Especially, it's even more settling down, right? Because she has to take care of this kid. But Aya says that she always thought that Noriko would marry someone who like listens to Chopin and something like Katharine Hepburn in there too.
Yeah, because she like idolized Katharine Hepburn.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like that's kind of like really like this happens a lot in this movie, and I didn't connect it to that until just now. But this kind of whole thing crops up a lot with like in most movies, it feels decisions are big and decisions are discrete and they're always at odds to one another because it's basically a romanticized fantasy version of life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
some people will be all Western and they're just like that's like what they're going to do. And then if the narrative requires it, they'll make a big transition and the moral of the movie will be that, they're going to turn towards either Easternism or something like that. But this movie isn't really about that. It's a lot more like subtle and like realistic in that
Mm-hmm.
like no one in life is like one way and she's probably going to be one way at one time in her life and then maybe change a little bit. And it doesn't like there's no point. Like there's no like big narrative gesture that's being made here. It's just that's how life is. Like
Yeah, it's not
things
like
happen You know?
Mhm. It's not like they're sorry for interrupting, but it's not like they're taking both sides. You know what I mean? It's not like the South Park thing where it's like everyone's an idiot. It's like they're not even really they're taking zero sides, right?
Exactly.
They're
Yeah.
saying the sides of the sides, and they're actually both pretty right. And not only are they both like valid in their viewpoints, but they are both simultaneously correct, despite the
Yeah.
fact that these sides should be conflicting, right? Like young versus old, traditional
Exactly.
versus progressive. We should
And
probably
I'm
start
making
getting
sense.
into our different voting because we're actually running out of time. And I
I don't
figured we
know.
could.
We have a good amount of time still.
Yeah, we're okay. I'll let you
Okay,
know if I have to like go.
okay. I just want to rush voting. Continue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's only around like 15 minutes or so. We should be good. But
Okay.
yeah, I just want to make sure, like, am I making sense with like that whole thing about like most movies are about big grand gestures
Yeah,
and this movie is
Oh
not?
yes,
yeah, for sure. And
that
that's
Because I
was
think like
both
so good.
that's both shown not only within like the narrative, but also within like the shots, right?
because I
There's
think
no
like
grand
especially
sweeping shot.
if we contrast it to like last week's movies, uh, we were debating a lot about like what the movie was saying. You know, like there's fantasy and there's reality, and which way is the director telling us is the right way to go? You
Mhm.
know, and like you said before, like it's about the sides. In this movie, it's realistic because there are no sides. Everything's it's just how life. It's just like this is a picture of life, and I really like that. It sort of like spends like the first like probably 80% of the movie just like showing you life, and then it kind of has like maybe a little bit of like a narrative direction at the end, but like most of like the actual marriage proposal comes up fairly late. Like there's not that much of a narrative here, really. It's mostly just a picture of life and then a slight gesture towards narrative at the very
I'm gonna disagree that there aren't sides 'cause I think there definitely are sides.
end.
I mean, we definitely have like this younger generation and the older generation, and the two cause conflict for each other, right? You see it with the her husband, future husband, and his mom, right? Where he wants to take this job, and that's gonna cause stress on his mom, and she just wants to live in Tokyo for the rest of her life. I think
Oh,
there are
speaking of, another
sides,
great
and
shot.
but they just don't fight against each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they just let life be how it is, and they kind of play their due course, and they do oppose each other too. I'm not saying that there is no there is a natural conflict, but just no one's trying to fight through that conflict. You know what I mean? No one's trying to swim across. No one's trying to swim upstream. They're all just kind of going with the current.
Exactly. Like the conflict is part of the setting.
Yeah.
And kind of speaking of that scene where he like the guy wants to go be a doctor in the country and it causes a conflict with his mom, like that was like probably one of like the coolest emotional scenes in the movie, I thought, because like she's crying and saying that she's overjoyed, which is probably the case. And then she's asking him if he feels okay about it, and he's like, "No, yeah, I'm happy." And he's just like sitting there stoically, and it's like they're both like if you just like took that scene out of context, you would be like, "Oh my god, these people are miserable,"
Hmm.
but like they're both saying that they're happy, and it's like such a cool contrast. I loved it.
Yeah. And I still wasn't sure if he was happy for a while either. After that scene, I was like,
Yeah,
"Is he okay?" But he was. He was okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it is supposed to be like about like him processing different things differently, and like people in general processing things different.
yeah.
I and Noriko are really fun, right?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
They're a hoot and holler. I love the where they're like talking about she's gonna move to like the country and she's gonna have the southern
Like,
accent.
yeah,
I
or
w-
the hick accent.
yeah,
This movie is actually so funny.
it is
Like there are
pretty
so
funny.
many hilarious moments.
But then also their relationship, it's cool because they're not just like. It's cool that these are our two main characters, right? They're kind of the they kind of starred in this kind of like are the main ones with this witty banter, right? Because that means we not only get these funny moments, but they can turn to these very serious moments. And it's cool seeing these two people depart from each other. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah,
almost more than the family, like seeing Aya and Noriko kind of go their separate ways is like was almost a more powerful story to me.
yeah.
Like we have the scene where they're like I said, so um what Ozu will do is that he will give more he'll frame people together when they have the same of like minds, and then they'll kind of frame people separately when they're not of like minds, right? And there's a scene, and I'm trying to find it in my notes. Okay, yeah, found it. Um, where the two are talking, and it starts off with a shot of them together, but then like as they grow separate, and they're talking about Noriko. She's gonna get married. This is so exciting, right? But
Mhm.
as it gets separate, like the two, they begin to kind of this start to shoot separately as kind of I realizes that like Noriko's just not the same point of life as her anymore, and that she wants something different. And not only that, but Noriko starts to dominate the screen time where she's getting shown way more. Where Aya's really only like there'll be times where Aya's talking and we still see Noriko, but there's never a time when Noriko's talking and we only see Aya.
Mhm.
And Noriko's kind of dominating the storyline. And, for Aya to be with someone who's married, their married life is the focus now. I thought that was super neat on Ozu's part. Derek, you've been quiet for a bit. Any other thoughts on the movie before we go to voting?
Well, I think uh just kind of we didn't I think we missed kind of some things about I can't think of the name. What's her name?
God, I goes more description than his chair, Derek.
My bad. Let me think about it.
Like the friend who's
Oh,
married?
well, how Noriko and like the uncle are like interact, because like I felt like that scene where they're like under the Buddha statue
Mm-hmm.
and like talking was like really important. Like something about that uncle, he was like such a hoot. I love that every time that uncle was on screen, I was smiling
Mm-hmm.
like every time without fail. And I feel like whenever those like Noriko went out on like with the kids and the uncle under the Buddha statue, there's like something there. I felt it was like something important about that scene, but I can't put my finger on it exactly because I feel like that uncle is supposed to like symbolize like the older generation in this story, and like him coming to the family is what kind of like sets things in motion. So I feel like he's definitely important.
Caleb, do you have any takeaways from that scene?
Um, no, but I have a hot take.
Okay, go for
It's
it.
a spicy one. I think that this movie was very good, but I will say I thought it was a little boring. It was a little slow paced. I think that will be a controversial opinion, but I'm interested to hear what you guys had to say because I thought everything in this movie was good, but the pacing was so slow.
Honestly, I kind of like that a lot. It was kind of slow, but it was kind of I don't know enjoyable for me because like first like hour of the movie or so or however long with the uncle, I just like smiling and just like having a great time.
Because
And
I
as
know
things
that's
I don't
because I
know
know that's like supposed to be part of the thing of the movie is that it's kind of like just gentle and relaxed and slow paced, but like maybe a little too much in my opinion.
I think
Hmm.
you're just supposed to take it in. Like I don't think you're supposed to like take it too serious, like the pacing, and just like kind of enjoy the experience.
Yeah, that's my thing. I think you kind of should relax too, right? You should watch and enjoy. I think sometimes when you're like taking notes on these things, right? It's almost like weakens the experience. You know? I think the idea is to get immersed so much that you don't really care even that there is or isn't a plot, right? You just care that these characters are talking. You're just enjoying kind of living in this world. Now, that said, Derek, I'm gonna challenge you a bit here. We don't have ton of time, but hopefully it'll be a quick challenge. Because I think it's consistent with me to not care about a slow paced movie. Now, you, just last week, when we are talking about Knights of
Yeah,
Cabiria, were going in about how for 40 minutes straight it was so slow and
yeah.
so boring. How do these two, how can you think both?
My issue with Knights of Captivity compared to early summer is I think probably indicative of my one of my main problems with Knights is that I didn't really care about any of the characters like a lick. But early summer, I don't know, it started out so strong. I think the introduction of the uncle was perfect because like I said, I loved every moment of that uncle just being kooky and that little brat of a kid. I don't know. So that probably without that character, maybe I'd have gotten bored with the slow pacing. But eventually, it like kind of lulled me enough that eventually I just started to care for the character so much that I was just looking forward to seeing more
Caleb,
and
you
just kind
buying
of enjoying
this?
the experience.
I do agree with like the point that was made earlier about like watching it just as a movie to watch and relax to is probably a different experience than one like watching it analytically to like later talk about. Because I think I was just kind of of the mind like, yeah, this is awesome, but I don't really have that much to talk about. Like, at least compared with like some movies, like if we're talking about The Sacrifice or something, where there's like you could take endless notes on every minute thing, and this was more like it's just kind of like you just relax and watch it. I can totally like I buy that.
I do think though that there's a lot we could talk about, especially in terms of shot composition and like who
Yeah,
dominates scenes and stuff. I think it's hard to dissect the way that we did, which is we kind of watch it once through taking notes. I bet though that if you like really pay attention, like shot for shot, you'd be enlightened with how like deep Ozu goes with some of this stuff. That
It's
said,
probably true.
we don't have time for that, and we have to keep devoting.
but yeah.
Really quick,
Also, I would say
Digger, we
it
really
was
gotta.
it was just I don't
Digger,
know.
we gotta go
This
through here.
shot comp, I think, also at the beginning that I don't know. There's nothing like interesting directorial for me at least in Nights, and that's probably why I got bored very quickly.
Okay, I strongly disagree with that, but that is for literally another podcast. Let's go through this though. Favorite quote.
Mm,
I already said mine, so it's a little bit of cheating to use it again. But in early summer, Noriko says to her brother Koichi, saying, "Women have become so forward, taking advantage of etiquette or whatnot." That quote, and she says, "That's not true. We've taken our natural place."
Yeah, I like that too. My
I was a
favorite
big fan.
was also from early summer. It's when Aya, they're all like kind of chit chatting. I don't think I can understand where they are. I think it's like after like the wedding party or whatever. And Aya says to the married girl, she's like, "You always go on about happiness, but it's just anticipation. Like before you go to the races, planning on which horse to bet on, then dreaming about how you spend your winnings." That was pretty good. Caleb, you got one.
yeah, well, Matthew, I hate to pull a boner on you, but I'm gonna have to use a quote that I talked about before. It it was just so funny. I liked it.
Okay.
I
Well,
also like the one from Only Angels Have Wings, where the doctor quotes Shakespeare. I love that Shakespeare quote so much.
yeah, that was fun.
That you only die once, and we all owe God a death. If you die today, you don't owe it tomorrow.
Yeah, I like that. That was fun. That doctor he's a cute little character.
Absolutely.
Um, favorite scene.
Early summer, also a scene I already mentioned. When it was probably like the first shift I noticed, in like confrontational wise, where Koichi and Noriko are at the bar talking, and it's like the first time he uses the like confrontational like structure where he like focuses on one person against one another. So he like picks Fumiko and Noriko on one side and Koichi on the other, and then he switches between them on close-ups. I thought that was really cool.
That was a good scene. Caleb.
I liked the scene. It was just so peaceful and relaxed when the granddad in early summer is like walking, and then he just has like the thing comes down. He has to like stop and wait for the train, so he just like sits on the bench
Oh
and just
yeah,
kind of like watches it go by. Something I don't know, like
Yes,
something about that was just like striking to me
yes, it was so good.
because it was just like pure like aesthetic value. There was no narrative here. There was no dialogue or anything. It was just a dude walking to the store and waiting for the train to go by, and I don't know, like it was very cool.
there was a couple scenes between the parents that I really enjoyed with them talking in early summer. But I think my favorite was probably the death of our good friend Joe and Only Angels Have Wings, which it's all off screen, which shouldn't be good, but it made it better somehow. And I think it was even better once you realize they can show it. You know what I mean? They just chose not to. Like if it was like kind of like a limitation, I think like a financial limitation or just like a technical limitation. But you see later that like they can show planes flying. It's not the issue. It's not the concern here. So that made it better. Favorite character.
I like
Uncle
Bonnie
in early
from
summer.
Okay, Caleb said Bonnie from
yeah.
Only Angels Have Wings. Derek, could you say?
Noriko from, or not Noriko, but also Noriko, but mainly the uncle from early summer. Dude, I literally could not stop smiling every time. He just, I don't know, he's such a warm character. I just couldn't get enough of him.
He's a good character. Gosh, I'm deciding between two. Okay, I'm gonna give an honorable mention to Isamu, the little brother.
Yeah.
That was so funny. Everyone just tells him what to do, and you can't tell if he's like actually wants to do it at all. But then also, my favorite is probably Aya from early summer. I just think she was a strong, independent woman. I loved it. I was here for it. Best performance.
Oh wait, I got it mixed up. Never mind. I think best performance was Bonnie.
Okay, who's your favorite
My
character?
best character, yeah, I would have to say Isamu. I hate him so much, but I also love him.
It's adorable. Derek, give the best performance.
Noriko. She was,
Yeah, she's really good.
yeah, I don't know how, that was just so good.
I think Kid and Only Angels Have Wings.
Yeah,
I think the
he
best
was also
performance.
really good.
They're both really amazing. Him and Noriko. I think Kid with a bit of a hot take here with
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bonnie.
Bonnie. Yeah.
I think because I very rarely am like actually struck by like someone's acting, and I think that like that moment that I described earlier was like the only time in watching either of these movies where I was like, oh, hot damn, that's some good acting. Not to say that other people are bad, but I think that was like for me at least just a standout moment that struck me.
Very much agree. Okay, the moment of truth. Which movie did you like better? Derek, you can go first.
I'm gonna say early summer. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. You kind of.
I
Sometimes
don't
Derek, you
know,
give it
but
away. I gotta be real.
yeah, I think it's fine for me to give it away because I don't know. Early summer was just so good. It was like you said, such a vibe.
It's a vibe.
I had such a great time watching it in entirety. Like there was moments where I just legit like had pure euphoria, especially that scene where they're at the, I forget, I don't know if it's Kabuki or not, but it might have been now. But when they're at their theater and the uncle just sitting there like with a smile on his face watching the play. I don't know. That scene warmed me.
She was sitting with a smile on his face, but he was also just like desperately trying to hear and see what was happening.
Yeah, it was hilarious. He was so happy yet struggling to hear it.
Okay, Caleb.
I'm also gonna say early summer.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Summer as well. I mean, Only Angels of Wings was a good movie. I guess that was
Oh,
the
for
case where
sure.
like it wasn't a blowout, but I think Earth Summer's just like solidly better. Now, this is actually gonna shock maybe some of our listeners, all like two of them, but we actually have our movie picked out for next week. Or two movies. It's gonna be Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole versus Robert Bresson's Mouchette. I think that's how you say it. Those are two movies for next week. Until next time, I'm Matthew Moore. I'm here with Caleb Ferguson and Derek Rosinski. And remember, watch more movies.